Have you ever wondered why Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine? Not healing the sick, not casting out demons, not raising the dead, but turning water into wine at a wedding. There's something deeper, a secret that many people have never realized behind this seemingly simple act. Imagine, a wedding celebration is taking place in Cana of Galilee. Laughter, music, joy filling the air. But behind that joy, a disaster is silently threatening. The wine has run out. In Jewish culture of that time, this wasn't just a small inconvenience, but an unforgivable shame for the host family. And it's at this moment that Jesus performed his first miracle. But why? Why would the Savior of humanity choose a wedding as the place to reveal his heavenly power for the first time? Why would he care about something seemingly as trivial as a shortage of wine? And what is hidden behind his mysterious words to his mother, "My hour has not yet come"? Today we will discover an astonishing truth. This first miracle wasn't just about wine and water. It was a prophecy, a symbol, and a warning of what was to come. A terrible secret was concealed in the act of turning water into wine, a secret about Jesus' own fate. The story is recorded in the 2nd chapter of John's Gospel. Jesus, his mother, and his disciples were invited to a wedding at Cana in Galilee. When the wine ran out, his mother came to him saying, "They have no more wine." Jesus' response was surprising. "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." Nevertheless, he performed the miracle. He instructed the servants to fill 6 stone water jars used for Jewish purification rites, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Then, he told them to draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. When the master tasted it, he was amazed because it was fine wine, even better than what had been served earlier. This was no small miracle. Jesus transformed approximately 120 to 180 gallons of water into premium wine. But strangely, this miracle wasn't widely announced. Only the servants, his mother, and his disciples knew what had happened. The master of the banquet didn't even know where the wine came from. This miracle is often misunderstood or simplified into a story about Jesus helping a family avoid embarrassment. But if that's all there was to it, why did John specifically note this as Jesus' first miracle? Why did he emphasize that through this miracle, Jesus revealed his glory? And why did the disciples believe in him after witnessing this? Something much deeper was happening at the wedding in Cana. In this video, we'll explore fresh perspectives on Jesus' first miracle. We'll delve into the historical and cultural context to understand why running out of wine was a disaster at a Jewish wedding. We'll analyze the symbolic meaning of water and wine in Jewish tradition and how Jesus used them to convey a profound message. Most importantly, we'll uncover the terrible secret behind the words, "My hour has not yet come," a statement that foreshadowed the tragic fate awaiting Jesus. We'll see how this first miracle silently signaled Jesus' final and greatest miracle. But this isn't just a history or theology lesson. We'll also discover how to apply the lessons from this miracle to our modern lives. How can we recognize the stone jars in our own lives, the rigid patterns, empty rituals, and soulless habits that need to be transformed by Jesus? How can we allow him to turn the water in our souls into wine, something new and full of life? Let's explore together the secret behind Jesus' first miracle. A secret that will change not only how you view this story, but also Jesus' entire journey on earth and his purpose for your life. Imagine a small village in Galilee more than 2,000 years ago. Music echoes through narrow streets, oil lamps flicker in the night, and the air is filled with the aroma of special foods. This is not just an ordinary feast. This is a wedding, one of the most important events in Jewish community life at that time. In ancient Jewish society, marriage was not simply the union between two individuals, but the connection between two families, even two lineages. Wedding celebrations typically lasted from 3 to 7 days, sometimes up to 2 weeks, depending on the status and financial capacity of the family. This was a rare occasion for everyone in the village to set aside their daily hard work to celebrate, sing, and dance together. The groom's family had to prepare for this event for many months, even years. They had to accumulate enough food, wine, and necessary items to welcome all guests. This was not just a matter of hospitality, but also a matter of honor. In a face-valuing culture like Jewish society, hosting a successful wedding was a symbol of prosperity, prestige, and blessing from God. And among all the elements of a successful wedding, wine played an indispensable role. Wine was not just a refreshing drink, but a symbol of joy, prosperity, and divine blessing. The Bible repeatedly mentions wine as a sign of the Messianic age, when new wine will flow from the mountains, Amos 9:13. Therefore, running out of wine in the middle of a wedding feast was not just a minor inconvenience, it was a social disaster. The host family would face prolonged shame, perhaps for many years or even generations. People would remember this wedding not for its joy, but for the failure to adequately provide for guests. In a society that valued honor and shame, this was an indelible stain. The Gospel of John does not tell us exactly what relationship existed between Jesus and the family hosting the wedding at Cana. However, there are many details suggesting this was not a distant relationship. First, both Jesus and his mother were invited to the feast. In the cultural context of that time, wedding invitations were usually reserved for relatives, close friends, or close neighbors. More notably is the role of Mary, Jesus' mother, in this story. When she discovered the wine had run out, she didn't simply report the situation but actively sought to solve the problem. This suggests she may have had a close relationship with the host family, perhaps even being a relative. In Jewish culture, women often took on the role of managing logistics for important family events like weddings. When Mary approached Jesus and said, "They have no more wine," she wasn't merely stating a fact. In the cultural language of the time, this was an indirect request, hoping Jesus would intervene in the situation. This shows that Mary was already aware of her son's special abilities, even though up to this point, according to John's account, Jesus had not performed any public miracles. Jesus' response is noteworthy. "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." The form of address, woman, in Greek gyne, was not disrespectful as in modern understanding. This was a polite form of address at that time, similar to how Jesus spoke to the woman at the well, John 4, and even when he was on the cross, John 19:26. The question, "What does that have to do with us?" literally in Greek, ti emoi kai soi, is a Hebrew idiom meaning literally, "what between me and you?" This is not a refusal, but a way of expressing that Jesus was acting according to a plan and timing different from what Mary was thinking. He was reminding his mother that his mission was not simply to solve family or social problems, but a divine mission according to God's timing. Nevertheless, it's noteworthy that despite Jesus' apparent refusal, Mary still trusted in her son. She told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." This is the most valuable advice Mary left in the Bible, advice that remains valuable to this day. To truly understand the deep meaning of this miracle, we need to explore the symbolic role of water and wine in Jewish culture and religion. Water in Jewish tradition was not just an essential element for life, but also the primary means for ritual purification. The law of Moses prescribed various washing rituals to remove ceremonial impurity. Devout Jews had to wash their hands before eating, after returning from the market, and in many other situations. Priests had to perform hand and foot washing rituals before entering the holy place. Even utensils like cups and plates had to be washed in a special way. The 6 stone jars mentioned in the miracle story at Cana were specifically for these purification rituals. They were made of stone because, according to Jewish law, stone vessels did not become impure like pottery. Each jar could hold 2 to 3 metrites, a unit of measurement at that time, equivalent to about 80 to 120 liters of water. In total, these 6 jars could hold about 480 to 720 liters, a very large amount of water dedicated to purification. While water symbolized purification according to the law, wine carried a completely different meaning. Wine in the Bible is often associated with joy, celebration, and blessing. Psalm 104:15 says that God gives wine to gladden the heart of man. In prophecies about the Messianic age, abundant wine was always a sign of divine blessing. Moreover, wine played an important role in Jewish religious rituals, especially the Passover. During the Passover meal, Jews drank 4 cups of wine, symbolizing the 4 promises of redemption in Exodus 6:6-7. Not surprisingly, later in the Last Supper, Jesus used wine as a symbol for his blood in the New Covenant. The contrast between water and wine in the miracle at Cana is not coincidental. This is the opposition between law, represented by purification water, and grace, represented by new wine. When Jesus turned water in the purification jars into fine wine, he was signaling a transition from the age of law to the age of grace, from the Old Covenant to the New Covenant. Notably, Jesus did not create wine from nothing, nor did he transform inferior wine into good wine. He chose to transform the very water used for purification rituals, a powerful symbol that he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, to transform it into something better, richer, and more joyful. The banquet master remarked to the bridegroom, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This comment unintentionally became a prophecy about how God acts in salvation history. The best is saved for last. The new covenant in Jesus is superior to the old covenant, just as the new wine was better than the purification water. Imagine the scene at Cana, joyful music playing, the atmosphere filled with happiness, but behind the smiles and laughter, a disaster is silently unfolding. The wine, the soul of the feast, has run out. In this moment of crisis, Jesus enters history with his first recorded supernatural act. 6 stone jars stand silently in the corner, each about 1 meter tall, large enough for a child to sit inside. These jars weren't for decoration or for storing wine. They were specifically for Jewish purification rituals. Each jar could hold 2 to 3 metrit, an ancient unit of measurement equivalent to about 80 to 120 liters of water. When Jesus commands, "Fill these jars with water," the servants must have been surprised. They needed wine, not purification water. But they obeyed, drawing water from a nearby well, perhaps making multiple trips to fill these 6 enormous jars. In total, the amount of water reached about 480 to 720 liters, an astonishing volume. The miracle occurred without thunderous sound, without dazzling light, without a grand proclamation. There was no dramatic gesture, no recorded prayer, no complex ritual. Jesus simply said, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." In that moment, H2O molecules transformed into something completely different, premium wine. The master of the banquet, unaware of the source of this new drink, tasted it and was so surprised that he called the bridegroom over. "Everyone serves the good wine first," he said, "and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This wasn't just ordinary wine. This was premium wine, wine worthy of being served at the beginning of the feast, not when guests' taste buds had become dull. And the quantity was astonishing, enough to supply hundreds of people for many days. A generous wedding gift far exceeding the immediate need, signaling the abundance of God's kingdom. Behind the act of turning water into wine lies a profound message about the transition from law to grace. The 6 stone jars, an incomplete number, lacking one to reach the perfect number 7 in Jewish symbolism, represent the inadequacy of the law. They were used for external purification rituals but could not satisfy the deep thirst of the soul. When Jesus transformed the water in these jars into wine, he was illustrating a revolutionary truth. The era of external hand-washing rituals was giving way to the era of inner transformation. The law of Moses, though holy and good, could only point out sin but couldn't redeem humanity. It was like water, able to wash away external dirt, but unable to change the inner nature. The new wine symbolizes the new covenant that Jesus would establish through his blood. It's no coincidence that at the Last Supper, Jesus took the cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." The wine at Cana foreshadowed the redemptive blood that would be shed at Golgotha. The prophet Jeremiah had foretold this new covenant. "I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts." No longer external rules, but inner transformation, like water turning into wine. No longer reluctant obedience, but voluntary joy, like wine bringing joy to the wedding feast. Furthermore, this miracle also heralded the abundance of the Messianic age. The prophets had foretold that when the Messiah came, new wine will drip from the mountains and milk will flow from the hills. The abundant wine at Cana, approximately 480 to 720 liters, was a clear sign that the new age had begun, an age of heavenly abundance. While the law came through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The miracle at Cana was a powerful declaration that something better, richer, and more joyful had come to replace the old system. It's no coincidence that John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, clearly recorded, "This, the first of his signs, Jesus did." This timing is strategic and meaningful in Jesus' mission. Consider this: Jesus could have begun his public ministry by healing the sick, casting out demons, or even raising the dead, miracles that would cause immediate shock and attract instant attention. Instead, he chose a relatively discreet miracle at a countryside wedding in a remote village with only a few people knowing what had happened. What does this tell us about Jesus? First, it shows that he wasn't seeking fame or recognition. He wasn't a magician performing to attract crowds. His miracles always had a deeper purpose than impressing people. Second, beginning his ministry at a wedding shows that Jesus didn't come to condemn human joy, but to sanctify it. He wasn't a grim ascetic, avoiding the ordinary pleasures of life. He came to bring abundant life, and his presence transforms ordinary moments into spiritual experiences. Third, and most importantly, beginning with the miracle of turning water into wine, establishes the foundation for Jesus' entire mission. This is a miracle of transformation, the recurring theme throughout his ministry. Jesus came not just to fix what was broken, but to transform it into something entirely new and better. The connection to Jesus' mission is profound. At Cana, he turned water into wine. Throughout his ministry, he transformed tax collectors into disciples, prostitutes into forgiven individuals, the sick into the healthy, and sinners into saints. And finally, on the cross, he transformed death into life, defeat into victory, and tragedy into redemption. This first miracle also foreshadows the final and greatest miracle, to the resurrection. Both involve fundamental transformation, water becoming wine, death becoming life. Both take place in settings involving stone, the stone jars at Cana, the stone tomb in Jerusalem, and both herald a new age, the Messianic age at Cana, the age of the church after the resurrection. When John writes that through this miracle, Jesus revealed his glory and his disciples believed in him, he is indicating that this was not just a kind act to save a wedding feast. This was a revelation of Jesus' true nature. He is the one with transformative power, the one who came to make all things new, the one who can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary and the empty into the meaningful. When Mary approached Jesus and said, "They have no more wine," his response puzzled many. "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." This statement conceals an astonishing secret that few people recognize. My hour, a mysterious phrase that appears multiple times in John's Gospel. But what exactly is this hour? This is not an ordinary unit of time. In Jesus' language, this hour refers to the destined moment, the climactic moment of his mission on earth, his death on the cross. Each time Jesus mentions my hour, he is pointing toward the most painful moment of his life. In John 12:27, he exclaims, "Now my soul is troubled. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I have come to this hour." And in John 17:1, before his arrest, he prays, "Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son." So why did Jesus say, "My hour has not yet come," at the wedding in Cana? Because when Mary suggested he solve the wine shortage, she was unwittingly pushing Jesus onto the path leading to the cross earlier than the heavenly plan. Each miracle Jesus performed not only revealed his glory but also brought him closer to that destined hour. This is the first terrible secret. The miracle at Cana wasn't just a kind act to save a wedding feast. It was the first step on the road leading to Jesus' death. When he turned water into wine, he began an irreversible journey toward the cross. Nevertheless, Jesus still performed the miracle. Why? Because of love, because of mercy, and because he knew it was the Father's will. He was willing to step onto the path leading to his own death to bring salvation to humanity. It's no coincidence that Jesus' first miracle took place at a wedding. In the Bible, marriage imagery is often used to describe the relationship between God and his people. The prophet Isaiah wrote, "As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you." Isaiah 62:5. In the New Testament, Jesus frequently compares himself to a bridegroom and the church to a bride. When John the Baptist was asked about his relationship with Jesus, he replied, "The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom, who stands and hears him, rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore this joy of mine is now complete." John 3:29. The book of Revelation concludes with the image of the wedding feast of the Lamb, the eternal union between Jesus and the church. Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. Revelation 19:7. Therefore, Jesus beginning his public ministry at a wedding carries profound significance. He was foreshadowing the new relationship between God and humanity, a new covenant established through his sacrifice. But here's the point that makes many people shudder. The wine at the wedding symbolizes Jesus' blood that would be shed. At the Last Supper, Jesus took the cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Luke 22:20. When Jesus turned water into wine at Cana, he was foreshadowing how he would shed his blood to establish the new covenant. The 6 stone jars used for Jewish purification rites represent the Old Covenant, the law of Moses. The new wine represents the new covenant, grace through Jesus' blood. This miracle was an action prophecy, foretelling the transition from the age of law to the age of grace, from external purification to inner transformation. The second terrible secret, from the very first miracle, Jesus was foretelling his own death. The wedding at Cana was a microcosm of his entire mission, transforming law into grace through the shedding of his blood. The miracle at Cana marked an irreversible turning point in Jesus' mission. After this miracle, John records, "After this he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem." John 2:12-13. In Jerusalem, Jesus did something shocking. He drove the merchants out of the temple. When the Jews asked him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do this?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." John 2:18-19. John explains, but the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. John 2:21-22. Immediately after his first miracle, Jesus began speaking about his death and resurrection. The road to the cross had been mapped out, and every step he took was directed toward that destined hour. There's another noteworthy detail. When Jesus was crucified, a soldier pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. John 19:34. Blood and water, the two elements present in his first miracle, the water in the purification jars, and the wine, symbolizing blood, that he created. The third terrible secret, Jesus' first miracle and his final moment on the cross, are connected through the imagery of water and blood. At Cana, water turned into wine, symbolizing blood. At Golgotha, blood and water flowed from his side. When we understand this connection, the miracle at Cana becomes much more astonishing. This wasn't just a kind act to help a family avoid embarrassment. This was a declaration about Jesus' entire mission, from turning water into wine at Cana to shedding his blood on the cross at Golgotha. This first miracle contains a terrible secret. It foretold Jesus' death. From the very first moment of his public ministry, Jesus knew clearly the road ahead. He knew that each miracle, each sermon, each confrontation with religious leaders would bring him closer to the cross. And yet, he moved forward because of his love for us. When we drink the wine during communion, we're not only remembering Jesus' death, we're also remembering his first miracle when he turned water into wine and began the journey leading to his ultimate sacrifice. In our modern world filled with technology and conveniences, we easily fall into the trap of formal religion, empty rituals lacking real connection with the Creator. Like the stone jars at Cana, many people's spiritual lives are just empty vessels, full of rules and rituals but devoid of true joy and vitality. The miracle at Cana invites us to experience a profound transformation from formal religion to a living relationship with God. When Jesus turned water into wine, he was illustrating his ability to transform what is ordinary and mechanical in our spiritual lives into something full of flavor, vitality, and joy. Ask yourself, is your faith like water or wine? Is it a set of rigid rules or a living relationship? Are you performing religious rituals out of habit or out of love? Are you going to church to check off an item on your weekly to-do list or to meet the one who created and redeemed you? The transition from law to grace is not just an abstract theological concept, it's a personal experience that every believer needs to discover. When we allow Jesus to transform our hearts, we discover that Christianity is not a burden but a joy, not a set of rules but a relationship, not an obligation but a privilege. A young woman named Sarah shared, "For many years, my faith was just stone jars, cold, rigid, and empty. I went to church out of duty, prayed out of habit, and read the Bible out of obligation. But when I truly encountered Jesus, everything changed. He turned the water in my soul into wine, a living faith full of joy and purpose. This transformation begins from within and radiates outward. It's not about changing external behavior, but about allowing Jesus to transform your heart. When that happens, you will no longer live under the burden of the law, but in the freedom of grace. You will no longer serve God out of fear, but out of love. You will no longer try to earn God's acceptance, but will live in the acceptance He has already given you. Do whatever He tells you. These simple words from Mary to the servants at the Cana wedding contain a powerful lesson about obedience that we need to apply in our modern lives. In an age of individualism and personal freedom, the concept of obedience is often considered outdated or even negative. We are taught to question everything, challenge every authority, and decide for ourselves what is right. But the miracle at Cana shows the power and beauty of simple obedience. The servants didn't understand why Jesus asked them to fill the purification jars with water. This seemed unrelated to the problem of wine shortage. They might have thought, "We need wine, not water." But they still obeyed, and it was through that obedience that the miracle occurred. Similarly, God often asks us to do things that don't seem logical from a human perspective. He may lead us down paths that weren't in our plans. He may ask us to give up things we value or step into areas that make us uncomfortable. A successful businessman named Michael shared, "When God called me to give up my stable career to start a non-profit organization helping the homeless, everyone thought I had lost my mind. Financially, it was a crazy decision, but I knew it was what God wanted me to do. Like the servants pouring water into the jars, I obeyed without fully understanding. And God turned the water of my obedience into the wine of blessing and purpose that I couldn't have imagined." Obedience is not blind or slavish. It's a trusting response to the one who knows what's best for us. When we obey God, even when we don't fully understand, we create space for Him to do wonderful things in and through our lives. Ask yourself, what is God asking you to do that you've been delaying due to lack of understanding or fear? Perhaps it's forgiving someone who hurt you, stepping into a new ministry area, changing careers, or simply spending daily time with Him. Whatever it is, remember Mary's words, "Do whatever He tells you." In that obedience, you may witness your own miracle. One of the deepest lessons from the miracle at Cana is that Jesus cares about every aspect of our lives, not just spiritual issues, but also our everyday joys, sorrows, and challenges. In the modern world, we often compartmentalize life into separate categories: spiritual, work, family, recreation, finances. We tend to think that God only cares about the spiritual part, going to church, praying, reading the Bible. But Jesus' first miracle wasn't healing the sick or casting out demons. It was solving a social problem that seemed trivial, a shortage of wine at a wedding. This shows that God cares about the smallest details of our lives. He cares about our joy, our relationships, and even our celebratory moments. Nothing is too small to bring before Him. A single mother named Lisa shared, "I always felt I should only pray about important issues, my children's health, my job, major decisions. But when I understood that God cares about every aspect of my life, I began bringing everything to Him, from utility bills to parent-teacher meetings, from car troubles to my smallest dreams. This transformed my relationship with Him. I no longer see Him as distant but as a close friend, always present in every moment of my life." Jesus' intervention at the Cana wedding also teaches us that He cares about our joy and happiness. Sometimes we think Christianity is only about sacrifice and suffering, but Jesus began His public ministry at a party. He came to bring abundant life, John 10:10, not just mere existence. The lesson for us is to invite God into every area of life, not just crisis moments or big decisions, but also small joys, everyday challenges, and ordinary moments. When we do this, we'll discover that no aspect of life is beyond His concern, and no situation is too small for Him to transform. Ask yourself, have you invited Jesus into every room in the house of your life? Or are there areas you still keep to yourself? Perhaps it's your work, relationships, recreation time, or finances. The miracle at Cana invites us to open every door and allow God to transform every aspect of our lives, turning water into wine in every area. Let me tell you about Sarah, a 38-year-old teacher from a small town in the central region. For 20 years as a believer, she had attended church regularly every Sunday, served in the choir, and even taught Sunday school for children. From the outside, Sarah was the model of an exemplary Christian, hard-working, dedicated, and faithful. But deep inside, she was experiencing a silent crisis of faith. Each day, Sarah felt her religion becoming increasingly mechanical and ritualistic. She read the Bible out of obligation, prayed out of habit, and attended church because it was the right thing to do. Her faith had become a set of rigid rules, like the stone jars at Cana, full of water but lacking vitality. Everything changed when Sarah happened to attend a Bible study about the miracle at Cana. The instructor shared about the deeper meaning behind Jesus turning water into wine, not just a kind act to save a wedding feast, but a powerful symbol of the transformation from formal religion to a living relationship with God. When I heard about the 6 stone jars used for purification, Sarah recalls, I suddenly realized that was me, a vessel full of religious rituals but lacking true joy and real life. I had become a water purification Christian, clean on the outside but without flavor, without vitality within. This realization brought Sarah to her knees, tears flowing, begging God to transform her water faith into wine, something alive, full of joy and meaning. She began to view the Bible not as a rule book, but as love letters from the Creator. She began to pray not as an obligation, but as an intimate conversation with her closest friend. I discovered that God doesn't want me to just follow rules. He wants a relationship. He doesn't care about how correctly I do everything. He cares about my heart. Just like at Cana, Jesus wants to transform me from within, not just make me clean on the outside. The change in Sarah didn't happen overnight. It was a journey, a gradual process, as she allowed Jesus to transform each aspect of her life. But the results were amazing. Colleagues noticed a new joy in her. Students felt more genuine love, and those around her began to ask what had changed. The miracle at Cana isn't just a Bible story anymore, Sarah shares. It's my story. Jesus has turned the water in my soul into wine, a living faith, full of joy and purpose. And the most wonderful thing is that He's still performing that miracle every day in my life. Sarah's story is not an isolated case. In our modern world, many people are living with water faith, a religion of rituals, obligations, and traditions, but lacking joy, vitality, and real transformation. We attend services, recite prayers, even serve in church activities, but sometimes wonder, is this all there is? The miracle at Cana invites us to recognize the stone jars in our own lives, rigid patterns, soulless spiritual habits, empty rituals that need to be transformed by God. These might be the habit of reading the Bible as an obligation without really receiving God's word into your heart, mechanical prayers, lacking real connection with God, attending church just to check off an item on your weekly to-do list, service stemming from guilt or obligation rather than love, relationships based on rules and expectations rather than grace and acceptance. In each of these areas, Jesus wants to perform a transformative miracle, turning water into wine, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, turning obligation into joy, turning religion into relationship. How can this happen in our lives? Remember what happened at Cana. First, there must be an awareness of need. At Cana, they realized that they have no more wine. In our lives, we need to honestly recognize that water, faith, though clean and correct, is not enough to bring the joy and vitality that God wants us to experience. Second, there must be Jesus' intervention. Mary brought the problem to Jesus, and we need to do the same. We need to invite Him into the dry, mechanical areas of our spiritual lives. Third, there must be obedience. The servants did what Jesus said, even though it seemed illogical. We also need to obey God, even when we don't fully understand or when it goes against what we're familiar with. A businessman named David shared, "I was a stone jar Christian, full of Christian business principles, ethical rules, and prayers before meetings. But when I allowed Jesus to truly take charge of my business, everything changed. He turned the water of Christian business principles into the wine of a Christian business mission, not just following rules, but truly reflecting God's love and grace in every decision, every relationship, and every transaction." Allow me to share a bit about my personal journey. I grew up in a traditional Christian family where faith was measured by church attendance, rule following, and avoiding clearly defined sins. Like the stone jars at Cana, my faith was full of rituals and rules, but lacking joy and true freedom. I still remember my turning point. It was when I was researching the miracle at Cana for a sermon. As I delved into the meaning of turning water into wine, I suddenly realized that Jesus wasn't just changing drinks at a party, he was declaring a complete paradigm shift in how we approach God. I began to ask myself, is my faith water, clean but flavorless? Or is it wine full of life, joy, and the richness of God's grace? I realized that although I had been doing everything right, I was still living under the old covenant of law rather than the new covenant of grace. I began to ask God to transform my faith, not by abandoning the good things I had learned, but by filling them with new meaning, purpose, and joy. I began to read the Bible not to find rules, but to meet Jesus. I began to pray not as a checklist, but as an intimate conversation. I began to serve not out of obligation, but out of love. The results were astonishing. Like water turning into wine at Cana, my faith was transformed from a set of rules into a living relationship. I discovered joy in things I previously did only out of duty. I found freedom in areas where I previously felt bound. And I experienced God's love in ways I had previously only known theoretically. The miracle at Cana is not just a historical story, it's an invitation to each of us. Jesus is still in the transformation business today, turning the water of formal religion into the wine of a living relationship with Him. When I look back at my journey, I see that the real miracle isn't what Jesus did with water at Cana, but what He has done and is doing in my heart. He has transformed how I see Him, how I experience faith, and how I live my daily life. And the most wonderful thing? This miracle isn't a one-time event. Just like at Cana, where Jesus provided abundant wine, about 480 to 720 liters, He continues to fill my life with His abundant grace, transforming me from glory to glory, from water to wine each day. Our journey of discovery has taken us from a simple wedding in the village of Cana to the mysterious depths of the divine plan of salvation. The miracle of turning water into wine, seemingly simple, has revealed a panoramic view of the Savior's mission. Looking back, we clearly see that this was not just an act of kindness to save a family's honor. This was a powerful declaration about the transition from the old era to the new. 6 stone jars, symbols of the imperfect law of Moses, were transformed into premium wine, heralding the new covenant soon to come through Jesus' blood. The terrible secret behind this miracle lies in Jesus' mysterious statement, "My hour has not yet come." From the very first moment of His public ministry, He already saw the cross ahead. Each miracle, each teaching brought Him closer to that destined hour, the moment He would shed His blood to establish the new covenant. The wedding at Cana and the cross at Golgotha are connected through the imagery of water and blood. At Cana, water turned into wine, symbolizing blood. At Golgotha, blood and water flowed from His side. The first miracle foreshadowed the final miracle, Jesus' ultimate sacrifice to redeem humanity. And now we stand before an invitation not just to understand the meaning of this miracle, but to allow Jesus to perform a similar miracle in our lives. He is still in the business of transformation, turning the water of formal religion into the wine of a living relationship with Him. Now, I want to challenge you to look at your own life. What are the stone jars in your spiritual life? What rigid patterns, empty rituals, and soulless habits need to be transformed by God? Perhaps it's reading the Bible as an obligation rather than an encounter with the Creator. Perhaps it's mechanical prayers lacking real connection. Perhaps it's attending church just to check off an item on your weekly to-do list. Or perhaps it's a faith based on rules and obligations rather than love and grace. What is God asking you to do that you've been delaying due to lack of understanding or fear? Remember Mary's words, do whatever he tells you. In that obedience, you may witness your own miracle. Ask yourself, is my faith like water or wine? Is it a set of rigid rules or a living relationship? Am I serving God out of fear or out of love? Am I trying to earn God's acceptance, or am I living in the acceptance he has already given me? The second challenge is to invite Jesus into every area of your life. The miracle at Cana shows that God cares about every aspect of our lives, not just spiritual issues, but also our everyday joys, sorrows, and challenges. Have you invited Jesus into every room in the house of your life? Or are there areas you still keep to yourself? Perhaps it's your work, relationships, recreation time, or finances. Open every door and allow God to transform every aspect of your life. The final challenge is to obey, even when you don't fully understand. The servants at Cana didn't understand why Jesus asked them to fill the purification jars with water. But they obeyed, and it was through that obedience that the miracle occurred. As we conclude this journey of discovery, I invite you to share your thoughts and experiences. Which of Jesus' miracles is most meaningful to you? Why? Have you experienced a transformation from water to wine in your spiritual life? Share in the comment section below. Your story might be an encouragement to others seeking similar transformation. Don't keep to yourself what God has done in your life. Share it so others can find hope and courage. If this video has touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with those you think need to hear this message. Each share could be a bridge leading someone to the transformation they're seeking. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss upcoming videos about other miracles of Jesus. In our next series, we'll explore the deep meaning behind Jesus healing the man born blind, another miracle with amazing secrets about God's plan of salvation. Remember, just like at Cana, Jesus has saved the best for last. Wherever you are in your faith journey, the best is still ahead. He is still in the business of transformation, and he's not finished with you yet. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. May God bless you and continue to transform you from glory to glory, from water to wine, from law to grace, from formal religion to a living relationship with him. God bless you.